Welcome to the Working Writer Podcast. A little bit since the last episode. I had a really good pattern going of every other week, and then I took another contract, and it is just a little bit too much to maintain that same schedule. So I have these episodes that I pre-recorded before I took the job, and I'm really glad that I did that because probably the whole project would flop if I hadn't. It's a really good lesson to me to remember in the future. If I have an idea like that and it has a large scope, seize the day because you just don't know how long that day's going to last. So here I am I recorded this episode. Today's episode was recorded in December, and today it is in May. And it was technically scheduled to release 4 weeks ago. Time flies when you're working hard. Oh, but all things happen in their time. This conversation that I had with Dr. Tim Gilmore is one of the original visions that I had for the podcast in the first place. Tim's a working writer in every sense of the word. He's a college professor, he's a novelist, and he has a giant living literary project called jackspsychogeo.com. We talk a lot about his website and his books, his creative process in this conversation. I'm very tempted to try to describe Tim's work to you, as you do, when you describe an author and what their body of work is like. Tim's work is hard for me to do that too, because while he might focus on a personality or a building for a piece, he gets into the underlayers and the shadows in the kudzu and the dust that was left behind by a ghost, and that crazy place down the street that everybody wonders about, but nobody knows the real story. Tim's going to go ask. Tim's going to go find out, and then he's going to make something beautiful about it. Or the bad guy that's in the church that nobody wants to talk about, he'll write about it. It's hard to put his work into a category, and it's just beautiful and poetic and layered, and it's always exciting. And I've always been very fascinated at how he produces so much. So it was, even though, I knew some of this being his friend, it was fun to get to tease this out in a conversation for the podcast. We go all over the place and would have gone longer if time had permitted. Of course, it did not. So I'm just going to get into it, my conversation with professor, novelist, and literary scamp, Tim Gilmore.
Yeah, here I am. Let me try and look like I'm not a caveman here.
Yeah, you don't have like long COVID hair.
I know, it's kind of ironic because, I had long hair so often before COVID.
Right? It's actually shorter than I think I've ever seen it.
Oh, probably. Yeah. Your hair looks great.
It's COVID hair. It's longer
yeah.
than it's been in 10 years. But
really?
Yeah, it grows really fast and it's going white, and I am letting it because
cool.
I like foxes actually. And so it reminds me of foxes. I'm like,
yes,
I'm gonna go with it.
That's awesome.
Just be what it is. So
that's so cool. Your setup there, like the microphone, and is that a Devil in the Baptist Church behind you?
It is.
I mean, wow. How
wow.
Even without that.
Yeah.
How cool is that setup you've got? You look like you're in a bookstore.
Well, I thank you. Most of my books are, and we can't talk quantity of books. You have more books than any person I know. Well, you have your own Chamberlains happening.
Many of which came from Chamberlains, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so most of my books are in storage because my other office, I was in the bigger room in our house, and there was a tree, a big giant southern oak tree was growing underneath it and through the floor.
Oh.
So we had to tear the tree out, and we put everything in storage in the driveway. This was a full year ago. Yeah. We just found out last week our contractor hasn't done anything this whole year. So I'm a little bit stressed out, but yeah. Jeez. So this is only a little bit about my books. Which is why this is the only book out, because I have several of your titles, but they're in boxes in the driveway.
You don't have to say that.
That is one of the reasons
why I wanted
you on, because I'm like,
I'm just kidding.
Tim is the most prolific.
No, you're so kind. So this tree was it was growing under the floor?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? And
Robert built this house in 1984-ish,
Okay.
and it's swamp. All of Mandarin is swamp. It's not really
Yeah.
supposed to. No one's supposed to be building here.
Yeah.
And they filled it
That,
in, and so the soil is really it's not packed really tightly. It's
uh-huh.
very swampy and sandy. So he planted an oak tree there when his son was young, like little.
Right.
And you know how our oak trees grow. So the thing was massive. It was a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful tree.
Sure. Sure.
Trunk, I couldn't wrap around it. It was huge.
Really?
And I started noticing, because I did all my painting and writing back there. So I started
Uh-huh.
noticing the doors were jamming and the windows wouldn't close. And
Wow.
then the floor cracked, and it cracked up the wall. I'm shit you not, right behind where I was sitting. Like I was like, my house is literally falling apart where I sit. My writing chair was right over the crack.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah,
Wow.
it was. And
Wow.
so we found out in hindsight, they told us, we had engineers out here, they told us they had to cut it
Yeah.
first, and then they're going to have to we had all kinds of thoughts. They were going to pour concrete under the house, they're going to pin
Mhm.
it down, they're going to tear the whole back half of the house off. I mean, it went all over the place.
Uh-huh.
So we cut the tree down, and we started the contracting process. And then they told us, actually, they're going to put these pins down.
Yeah.
They're just giant like pins. They go 30
Huh.
feet below. We
Oh,
never had
wow.
to cut the tree, because they cannot pull the roots out. The roots are as
Uh-huh.
big under the house as they were above the house.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So
Right. Right.
we never had to cut it,
Wow.
and it sucks.
I feel. Oh, yeah. Wow. I feel like there's like a like several metaphors in there that I haven't quite. I don't know exactly what they are,
There
but
are so many metaphors.
the fact that
True.
the roots are breaking up the place where you're writing, that seems metaphoric. The
Yeah.
fact that you didn't have to cut the tree but you thought you did and you did, that seems metaphor. Reminds me of the Giving Tree a little bit. Do you know that
Yes,
Shel
I know that story
Silverstein?
well. I have that
Yeah.
right here.
Aha. Aha.
Let me grab it. Because
Yeah.
yeah, and it is
That's it.
horrible. This is my favorite part of the Giving Tree. That is the best author photo ever.
Oh, absolutely. It looks like a caveman. Yeah.
Shell was
I
not
think.
having it. Also, his book, I mean, that's a pretty twisted as fuck book, actually, because
True.
it teaches this like codependent consumption that
Mm,
isn't actually healthy. The tree
right.
had no boundaries. The tree could have said, no kids,
Tree had
actually.
no boundaries. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good reading of the book. The tree had no boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason why it's so handy is because I have a manuscript for a children's book. It's an adult self-care book formatted like
Uh-huh.
a children's book called The Gentleness Diet, and it's written in that style, but it's about boundaries and taking
Mm.
care of yourself in a comforting picture book kind of way. I don't know if I'm going to do anything with it. It's been sitting there
Oh,
for
cool.
a couple years.
Really?
It's the
Oh, wow.
perpetual project that
Yeah.
we have many. So we should back it up a little bit.
Okay.
I'm gonna do an introduction that
Okay.
explains like, who you are and how I know you, and I don't know. You have too many titles for me to list, so you're gonna have to give me some guidance there. But the reason why I wanted you on was because you managed to do exactly what this show is about.
Mm,
It's a working writer. That's called the Working
mm,
Writer Podcast, because I want to explore all the ways people find a way to do the thing and pay their
mm.
bills with words. And it's
Uh-huh.
different for everybody. Like, there's as many ways to do it as there are writers. But
Right.
you're an
Right.
example of a teaching professor who's also an
Mm.
extremely prolific writer, novelist, blogger. And you also have a lot to say about local promotion and writers groups and connection and Jacks by
Yeah.
Jacks and all that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm hoping we'll go.
Okay.
So
Wherever you steer it, I'm happy to go.
let's start with your whatever you're working on right now, because I know you are due, like you just finished a book,
Oh.
right? You just launched one during
Yeah.
COVID.
So true, yeah. So the newest book to come out is it's called Murder Capital: 8 Stories, 1890s to 1980s, and it came out in August, in the middle of COVID, as you mentioned, and it's interesting because promotion has always been the thing that I have struggled with, because I had to learn to put myself out there this way. By nature, I would have just written and hid behind that, and it's that's me. Put that out there and then keep myself in the background. And yet, so during this pandemic, of course, we have not been able to do things the way we normally would. Normally I would try to have a sizable reading somewhere, and we did have a small socially distanced reading at Southlight Art Gallery downtown, and the way that the owners of the gallery set it up was to have just a few people in at a time and stagger it and have 4 different readings. So
Wow.
sounds kind of strange, but it worked. Really, I think it worked well. But
Kind of.
I'm definitely looking forward to getting back to actually seeing people again. Yeah. So
Are
that
you?
that's
Are
that's
you
the first
though? Like we're introverts, right? We're like,
one. It's not been nearly as hard for me as for a lot of people,
Mhm.
to tell you the truth. Yeah. I feel in some ways like there's always been a pressure um, to do social things to get my work out there, and I do want to do some of those things, but I do actually also feel like, because of this last year, maybe I don't have to feel as much pressure about that when we come out of this pandemic as I did before.
Like an aha.
And I do a lot of things virtually.
Mhm.
My website gets a lot more readers than the books do, and so it's kind of good to know that I can occupy those spaces. And although I do want to get out into the world with people, and I'm miss seeing friends more, at the same time, um, yeah, I think I'm going to feel a little bit less pressure. Somebody somebody told me that the good thing about the pandemic, which they didn't word it that way, but the good thing about everything being shut down, I guess, is that there's no more FOMO. There's no more fear of
Right?
being left out.
Now I'm afraid of like what
People
happens if
missing
I'm
out.
included. Like, please don't invite me anywhere. I'm
Yeah.
not want to go
Right,
anywhere.
right,
I don't
right,
want to
right.
deal with it. I don't want to deal with it on a normal year, though. That's the truth.
Mm.
I think it's important to acknowledge, I guess, in your career, you're at a place where you're probably experiencing a certain amount of momentum based on years of work. Like your blog is it's so extensive, and it isn't like your website just started doing better for you than your books. Like that, there's so much content there. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting because when I look at my statistics for for the website, and I look at the first couple of years that I had it. So next year will be the 9th year that I've done it.
wow.
And when I first started doing it, and I think this is like you blogged back in the time period where you could just blog something and get 8 million people. I mean, maybe exaggerating a
My
little bit.
website used to get 80,000 hits a day.
That's
It
yeah,
It's a lot
I
by
don't get
today's
that.
standards even, but it was before
Yeah.
Google's algorithm change, the panda switch. It was when blogging
Huh.
was brand new.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a lifestyle blogger around the time of like the Pioneer Woman and Glennon Doyle with Monastery and all that was just getting started. Those were
Mm-hmm.
my blogging buddies. They went on to have big careers. I went a different way. My life blew up, so it was like
Yeah.
different, but also blogging isn't like that anymore. So
Yeah.
if
Yeah. Yeah.
anybody who's held it now, also your blog is different than anything that I've done because you're talk about it, explain what it is, because I mean I know what it is, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So,
different.
well, so it's Jack's Psycho Geo, and I have it's my own fault that I've had to explain for almost a decade why it has such a weird name.
It's a
People
great name.
often think that it's jackpsycho.com. It is not jackpsycho.com.
There are a
Psycho.
lot of psychos in Jack's though.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's true. Psychogeo is short for psychogeography, which is the psychology of geography. It's about the spirit of place, and it's a movement in art and writing. So, some writers who have been called psychogeographical writers do that kind of work, exploring the spirit of place in novels. So, Peter Ackroyd is a really good example, and one of my favorite writers, British writer. Um, Other writers who are called psychogeographical sometimes would be like Ian Sinclair, who is also a British writer who, writes 1,000-page books about walking around the periphery of London, and so that's a
Is
little bit
there a
less
plot
accessible.
in his books? Like, or is it just,
What's that?
is there a plot in his stories, or are they
Yeah,
just
the plot is, and then I saw this, and then I saw that, and then it's it's a much different kind of thing. So there's a lot of room for variation and under the term psychogeography, but I've always liked the term. Actually, UNF professor Alex Menicalls first taught me what psychogeography was a long time ago, and told me about some of its roots. It had some pretty radical roots. Guy Debord and some French writers and artists were all about disrupting place. So to them, psychogeography, well, different people made it different things, but psychogeography might be about changing all the signs in the neighborhood so that suddenly it was a different place. And of course, not doing that with any kind of official, sanction or anything,
that sounds so fun.
yeah, yeah. So, it can mean a lot of different things. So, when I started it, it was actually, I had this idea of writing a novel in the shape of the city, and I've always liked writing about cities. So I did that, and it was, it wasn't in the shape of a plot. It was, while this is going on in this neighborhood, this is going on in this neighborhood. And I kind of liked the idea that William Carlos Williams, the poet, did with Paterson, about Paterson, New Jersey, his hometown, and the city is kind of like the character. In fact, Peter Ackroyd, whom I mentioned a minute ago, wrote a great book called London, the Autobiography. So it's like as if London itself wrote, its life story. So I did that, and it was strange and unwieldy, and I decided to break it up into its constituent parts. So that's why some of the oldest stories on Jack Psycho Geo are very different from the newer stories. There's actually a few stories in there, like the story is just like, it's been raining and there's a cat sleeping under this car on the side of the road, and that's pretty much the story for a particular neighborhood from 9 years ago.
But you've also just described Jacksonville, like that's literally where we live.
Yeah, right, yeah, and that's so that was the original, that was the thing that started it, and since then it's taken on a life of its own, and I've got somewhere around 550 stories. And so I'm constantly trying to explore different places. All of the stories are based in place, so you can search the site if you wanted to by up top, center, east, north, southwest, and but the stories are all based in particular locations around the city. So that's
usually anchored in a landmark. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever that landmark may be. It may not be a landmark to anybody before they see this story. It might be a church or a bar. It might be an old house or a creek. I mean, so it's as many different places as I can. I like to be able to write about the stories of places that you might not actually have thought of as distinct places before.
Yeah. My favorite part about it is the layers that you reach underneath and how you think about what was there beforehand that might be
Yeah.
influencing the energy of a place now. It brings that like hauntedness that the South
Yep.
seems to have.
Yeah, you put that so well. That's exactly it. I feel like the stories are just out there in the landscape. They're there. People are sometimes say, how do you find these stories? Basically, any place that's been there for a while, if you dig into it, you find strange things. Inevitably, people are dramatic, and they do weird things, and the stories are out there. They're out there in the landscape. So I also think of it as kind of a kind of archaeology. It's like I'm excavating what's out there, but we can't necessarily see right on the surface.
That is, it's interesting you say that because I know that archaeology is not in the name of the website, but it always makes me think of that word. That's
Oh, good.
almost
Yeah,
like if I like have to stop and think about it, that it's not
yeah.
like Jack's archaeology because there's something in the cadence that and the topic. I also have this like imagine, I don't know if this is real or not. You'll have to tell me if this ever really
Okay,
happens. But I
okay.
imagine that there's people that are going to move to Jacksonville that type in different things and
Uh
land on your blog and they're like, "What the hell? Is this where I want?"
huh. Yeah, I've had some really interesting responses over the years. Not all of them good. um, you
Okay,
know.
tell.
Gosh, well, there's a number of different interesting responses. Sometimes people who have most people that I speak to for a story are really willing to share, and that's actually always been really interesting to me is that the vast majority of people are, they want to answer questions, they want to tell you what they know. But every now and then I run into some older characters who feel proprietary about things. But I've also had I've had a number. So I've written about Otis Toole, the
Mhm.
phony serial killer. He did not really kill hundreds of people with Henry Lee Lucas, but a lot of people still believe that he did. But I've had lots of people contact me and tell me about their supposed run-ins. A lot of them I don't think actually were Otis Toole, but they believe that they ran into Otis Toole at some point back in the day. I've had those kinds of interesting discussions, and so that's one of the things I like best about it is that there's discourse, there's conversation, and I add to stories if I have a story that I did 4 years ago and somebody just discovers it and emails me and has some kind of connection to it. I'll talk to them and I'll add to the story. That happens quite a bit.
That's cool. I think
Yeah,
that's happened to me on occasion. I've seen like where you've updated a post or you
right.
in the comments, if you read the comments on the Facebook post, you can see that you've amended
Yeah.
details.
So there's a strange old building far out on Beaver Street, which is almost to Baldwin. The building is called so it's out in the woods. The building's called the Old Spanish Trail Building. And so I did a story about it years ago, and I had people tell me, "Oh, that used to be a brothel," but I couldn't find any evidence of that. And you also get used to certain kinds of urban legends. People love to believe that an old building was a brothel, and and most of the time it was not. But recently, someone contacted me, and he's like, "Yeah, my dad used to go in there," and so his father was a moonshiner and would visit the Old Spanish Trail when it was a brothel and leave his son in the car with a
Ew.
Coke. I know, it's so weird. And I had some kind of personal memory from somebody that could confirm something.
Mhm.
And you can't always, of course, rely on people's stories, but I like to even if I can't rely on a story, I like to try and include it somehow. If even if I need to say, that there's something maybe not definitive about that,
Yeah, you
because I
capture
like
the
this.
poetry of and the unreliability of people's narrations, and
Yeah,
yeah, you capture all of that really well. What
thanks.
do you
Yeah.
think? Where do you think it's going? Is it just going to be this
Oh man.
perpetual work, or I mean, because there's just so much in it. It's to describe it like a website's almost insulting because so much more than that. You're getting a history that just doesn't
Mm,
exist anywhere else about of a place. You know that
right.
time period.
Yeah. A number of people have said I should print anthologies of it, like, and I, to the best I could figure out, it would be if I printed the stories in book form, it would be something like 800. It's like 850,000 words, So I don't even, I mean, it would be enormous. Yeah, right. I don't know where it's going. I wonder that myself. When I hit 500, I had this feeling like, that's a nice number to stop at. And then, I did the 501st and the 502nd.
And on you go.
And there have been times when I'm tired of it. And then something catches my interest and I become obsessed with this whole other thing that I have to write about. So, but I hope that people can see the whole thing as a literary project. I mean, that's what really it's me trying to write my hometown,
Yeah.
um, and I mean, so there's this, Borges writes about maps that are the size of the world, which, makes them totally impractical because, you would need a map for that map. But, at times I like to think of this as being a writing project that approximates the size of the city, which of course it's not, but that's kind of the postmodern idea that
It would
I
come
go
the
around.
closest as to anything else, like also because of the way Jacksonville meanders and has been consolidated and
Yeah.
hodgepodge together, that almost is metaphorical for the maybe that's the word today for the
Mhm,
for the site itself, because you're piecing together these things and then it's creating this body of work, and that's exactly what they did with this place. And they
yeah.
we try to have this cohesive identity, but we've never achieved it. The city just
Mhm,
doesn't know who it is at all.
mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
they're demolishing downtown, as it's still doesn't know what it is. We
Yeah,
knock
yeah,
it over and
yeah.
start over. Okay, how many times?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a million frustrations with that. Jacksonville is, as you said, it's never really known who it is as a city. It's never been able to, if you look at the way cities even market themselves sometimes, Jacksonville, actually, there's quite a bit that's distinctive about Jacksonville for a Florida city. It has this great array of historic architecture downtown, but the that most Florida cities don't have. It could, if it were marketed this way, that
Mhm.
could stand out wonderfully from Orlando,
Yeah.
in that way. But the city, I mean, historically, it's said things like, when it was trying to lure insurance companies to town in the 60s, it called itself the Hartford of the South. Well, and it might be a little bit, it still doesn't know how to tell its story, how to brand itself. It's eternally frustrating,
I
but
forget even that we have this giant, beautiful river running through the heart of it. Like,
right. Yeah.
who gets that? And
Yeah.
sometimes our I'll look at our tourist stuff and they don't even
Yeah.
show the river or the water. It's like we're a coastal city with a giant one of two rivers in the world, that run north.
It's pretty astounding.
Crazy. It
Yeah, it
is.
really is. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me see if I can get my question. I had a spin-off question about the blog. I thought, oh, I was thinking about how much mad respect I have, actually, because you have the writer's curiosity that a lot of, writers have to have a certain curiosity
Oh
to
yeah.
uncover and excavate and look. But you
Yeah.
also have whatever it takes to go into our woods, scare neighborhoods, look underneath rocks. Like, so like the sheer physicality of where you're going. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, there's moccasins in those woods. What's he doing
Sure.
walking through this woods? And I know
Yeah.
you've got
Yeah.
your blue Converse on. You're like, you're not wearing snake boots. What's that like when you go out in the field and you're like digging around? I
I
mean, have
mean,
you ever like thought you were getting shot or
oh,
snake bit?
sure. Yes, we are in the South, you know. We are in Florida. Yeah. That's the thing. Every time I think, you know, like, wow, I want to be you know, I'm in a certain mood, and I think I want to be a contemporary Thoreau. I have to remember, if you go out and live in the woods here, you
Mhm.
know, you're going to be surrounded by gunfire. It's not, you know,
Yeah.
it's not Walden Pond. Yeah. There have been times, uh you know, times I've heard gunfire out in the woods, times I've heard gunfire right next to Atlantic Boulevard, you know.
Um,
I've
yeah, because
had
you do go everywhere. You you
yeah.
go in the old hotels that
Yeah.
one day they were new at one point, but they're not
Right.
new now.
Right. I think one of the my favorite images is that I was in this small uh, graveyard in the woods on the north side, Pumpkin Hill area. And as I had been, you know, looking at the graves and walking around the graves. And as I left that area, I looked back, and there were several wild boar that just were walking, just grazing and walking amongst the graves. And they were big, you know, and those things are, you know, they're wild and they're mean. But just the image of those beasts just kind of wandering amongst the graves was like,
Yeah,
wow.
I
You
just
know?
had goosebumps. It's very
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman. I ah,
Yeah,
oh God.
yeah. You know, that's an image that I think of every now and then, and I mean, it was frightening, you know, but I love the image of it, you know.
Why were you in the woods in a cemetery at night in the
I
first
didn't say it
place?
was at night. Did I say it was at night?
I thought, well, I mean, my
You
imagination
just
was
assume, yeah.
right.
No, it was in the daytime,
Okay.
but still, this is and I heard gunshots out there, and there's, you know, this is a kind of place where you're walking around, there's shotgun shells all over the ground, and people throw out just a bunch of junk right next to, in the woods, right next to the graveyard,
So
you
you
know.
got like old mattresses and cooking
Yeah,
utensils and crap
yeah,
like that.
it's very sad, quite
Yeah.
frankly, you
Yeah.
know. And yeah, I think a lot of times people don't realize how many graveyards there are, you know, that back in the day, you know, a lot of them were basically family graveyards, or families, you know, maybe graveyards for a couple of families. Or, you know, for Black residents, they're just like everything else, cemeteries were segregated, you know, and Jim Crow days. And so Black businessmen and leaders created these spaces where, you know, Black people could be buried with some kind of dignity, and it would be taken care of. And a lot of those graveyards, there's a number of them along Moncrief, are not taken care of anymore.
Mhm.
And it's just, it's heartbreaking and frightening, quite frankly, you know, to go through some of those and just see the shape of things, you know. The ground is broken in over some of the graves, and, you know, it's just it's not how anybody wants their family members to be, you know,
Right.
taken
Like
care
you're
of
lucky if the
after they're
ground
gone.
is even ever cut. I mean, I was
Right.
just, it's weird timing. I was just down Moncrief and into
Mm,
Dinsmore last week,
mm,
and it feels really old and layered. You know, it's what I
yeah,
always feel like there's like just layers and layers there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I saw one of those graveyards that was like that, and it was, this
Mm,
one was somewhat kept. It was at least had a fence around it. But I was just,
yeah.
it's an old place. It's an old and new at the same time, because you know America's still younger than
True.
everywhere else
Right.
in the world.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's this thing that the anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss says in Tris Tropique, where he talks about how things age faster in the new world. I've thought about that a lot of times. And, we don't build for things to last for the most part now, you can go to an old European city and things are much better preserved in certain places than things that are 50 years old here,
Oh,
so
right. I think
yeah.
about that in Arlington because Arlington was built all at one time. So it's
Mm,
aging all at one time.
mm.
And now
Okay.
we've had this like exodus away from office buildings and things. People aren't going to go
Yeah.
back to work. You're going to
Yeah.
have so many vacant buildings that
Mm,
just need to be, returned to the land, I guess, somehow. But that isn't how commercial development works. They don't just.
and you can look at the shapes of cities that way, that as people were moving out of downtowns, as white flight was happening,
Mhm.
they moved into the new suburbs, which are now inner rings of suburbia. And as people kept moving out, the inner rings of suburbia grew old really quickly. And at a certain point, when people started moving back into the oldest neighborhoods again, then all of those earlier rings of suburbs become kind of like the new version of the inner city, and it's
Yeah.
almost like tree rings, that yeah, you can see a lot by the shape of the geography. You can see um, you know mass movements and psychology of large groups of people over big periods of time that
Yeah,
way.
I know in Jacksonville we had our core actually has some architectural integrity to it. So there's something to go back to. And those middle cores, like that's shoddy construction. It's not going to be
Yeah,
around. People aren't going
yeah,
to be like
right.
renovating. They're a little
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
some of the concrete block places, maybe.
Right.
Maybe.
Some of those, yeah, some of that most brutalist architecture that, yeah.
The flat roofs and they have
Yeah.
terrazzo floors. They got that going.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So let's segue. We're kind of at the halfway point. I want to talk about how you do what you do because what I am convinced of is you probably don't sleep much. Because before COVID, I mean, okay, so you have a day job, you're a professor,
Right.
you write so much. Now, I'm a little more, I've been researching into people who have learned how to be really prolific and fast
Oh,
and
yeah.
speed write and stuff. And I don't know if that's what you do, but it's a little less, I don't know what the word is. I'm not as freaked out about it anymore. Like I used
Mm.
to be just like, oh my God, I can get a short story written and he's just released another book. Like how? Because they're good. I want to know about your process. Um, all of it. I just want to know
Yeah.
how you schedule your life to make it happen.
Well, so in the first place, I'd be really interested in knowing what you have discovered, through your research. Maybe we can talk about that,
Mhm.
sometime. Um, I sleep more than I used to. Um, there was a period of time where, and I know that everybody, or at least a lot of people, recommend getting up really early and starting writing. And I think that's probably really good advice. And it also maybe tests your dedication because you have to be committed to doing this, for some reason, there's a lot of people who want to be writers. I guess it has some kind of messed up mystique or something, but not a lot of people who want to do the hard work,
Right.
So even though that's the case, that I think is probably pretty good advice to get up early. For several years, what I did was got up, got the kids to school, went and taught, and usually slept for about an hour sometime in the afternoon when I could. And then, maybe 8 or 9, sometimes later than that, I would start writing. And
Oh my goodness. At night.
yeah, and so sometimes I would write until 2 in the morning, and that got to be exhausting after a while. I mean,
Mhm.
I did it for a while, for a long time after it was exhausting, to tell you the truth.
Mhm.
Um, so there was a good period of time where I really did not get much sleep. I get more sleep now,
That's
and it is good because I like sleep actually. Um, and and you feel healthier when you sleep. It's astounding. It's
yeah,
almost like
it's a
it
little
is.
thing that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So right now, what I so I try to do a Jack Psycho Geo story a week, um, and that involves doing different things on different days. I try to write a little bit each day and research a little bit each day, and I go back and forth with it, and then so by the time the end of the week is here, I've got kind of hodgepodges of stuff that I can order and move the pieces around into what kind of order I want, and then play with the wording and bring it to the point that I think is ready for it to come out. And I'm also I don't want to say exactly what it is just yet, but I'm working on a longer piece that is looking at the history of a particular place that I want to that will be. Um, I haven't decided exactly what the form will be yet. I think it'll be in book form, but it won't be a big book. I don't know. I've got too much. I have a sense of it, but I can't give that sense in words at this point. But I mean, this is also the end of the term. So I've got mountains of grading at the moment. So I'm behind on lots of things at the moment. And I think that's an inevitable part of it. I mean, I pretty much always feel like I am behind on everything in my life, you know?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, because you're on the semester schedule too. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I've felt that from as an observer. I've heard you mention here and there enough times of like the rhythm of the year when you do
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
you seem to do a lot of your like vagabond exploring and stuff during the summer. Is that accurate?
Um, that's certainly when I'm freest to do it. So it's interesting. I haven't really thought about like if there were a chart, would it be highest in the summer months of when I'm wandering around? I mean, really, you mentioned earlier, I think the curiosity that writers have to have,
Mhm.
and it's an obsession, really.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is obsessive, and so whatever is going on, if I need to go check a place out, then I need to go check it out.
Yeah, and you're like not really going to be settled until you do. I mean,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's
yeah.
going to constantly be eating at my brain until I listen to it and do what it tells me to do.
I'm
So,
very curious about that in writers. It's something that's coming out in the podcast because I've
yeah.
always called myself a compulsive creative.
Oh.
People will be like, I can't believe you do all these things. I'm like, they're not really conscious choices. I can't not do them. They
Uh-huh.
haven't all paid off. Like I'm not like
Sure. Right.
I'm not where I want to be, but I can't not do it. And I've heard
Mhm.
that same, like there's a compulsive, obsessive, but that sounds so negative. I don't think it's negative. I think it's
Uh-huh.
an essential part of the passion that makes us makers. Like there's something in there that's emerging that
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because you're right. I think creativity is often while as a culture, we praise it. It's interesting. We're kind of split personality about it because we praise creativity and talk about what how much we need it in the world and corporations and this and that. But at the same time, if you look at how artists of any kind are portrayed a lot of times, I think our culture is fascinated by seeing creativity as almost something that is almost something that's trying to exercise something, an exercise in the sense of like an exorcism, you
Right.
know. So
Right.
so our culture is fascinated by connections between creativity and mental illness, for
Hmm.
example, and addiction,
Neurosis.
things like that. Yeah, to the extent that you know, if you look at least in my experience, looking at kids in art schools when, you know, when they're in their early teens, they've heard those messages and seen those examples so much that you know, I've seen kids almost trying to um, wear those kinds of mental issues like they're a
Hmm.
uniform or something, which was really troublesome, you
It
know.
is the pathos and the depression and the
Mhm.
identity. It's almost an expectation you're supposed to carry.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think our art schools, having we're both parents that have been through that.
yeah.
It's damaging, and I don't know how unavoidable it is, but I used to call that the first pandemic. I didn't used to
Mm,
know what a pandemic, and no one saw this coming. But I
right.
used to say that depression was pandemic in those schools because
Yeah,
it was almost a badge of identity. Like you're supposed to
right,
feel miserable.
right,
You're not making art unless you're suffering.
right, and yet I also think there's something to that, you
There
know,
is.
and I'm
We're
not
moody fucks.
and I'm not the I think I am mentally healthier right now than I have been in a long time, but
Hmm.
throughout my life, I'm not necessarily, you know, the picture, you know, of mental health. I mean, I'm not, you know, schizophrenic or anything, you know, I can function. But I guess I'm kind of talking all around this. There is this way of talking about art and creating as though it is, as you said, almost a negative need. Like it's something you do if you've got something broken about you.
Yeah.
And I think there again can be truth to that. But if you also look at the compulsion of curiosity, um, then I think you can, you know, you can look at the phenomenon of creating overall in a more positive sense because um, you know, when if you are really depressed, you don't necessarily feel that curiosity because part of
Hmm.
depression as opposed to just sadness is anhedonia, the inability to feel joy or pleasure. It's and so curiosity is I think what brings us out of the darker times and gives us hope, because when you're curious about something, you have to know about it. It pulls you forward. It is a compulsion, but it's a positive compulsion, I think.
Hmm.
And you know, if we're curious people, then we imagine things into being. You know, things before people invented certain things, they had to imagine those things. You know, and they had to have the requisite curiosity in order to do that. Um, I mean, I don't understand non-curious people, you know.
I don't either. I don't either.
I
I think of
yeah.
it in terms of like anxiety and sobriety a lot
Uh-huh.
because my anxiety, my personal anxiety goes up if I'm not creating. It's
Mm,
because it's definitely a valve release for me.
yeah,
Um, I can't not be curious. It's gotten to me in trouble so many times in my life, but it's like I can't not be curious.
right.
And the whole the mystique around writers that you kind of have to be drunk all the time in order to do it.
Uh-huh.
Like, who produces like that? I
Right.
Hemingway's, write drunk, edit sober. No thanks. I'll be sober both. I like bourbon, but not when I'm working because I'm working. So it's that like
Well,
division.
you know, some of the characters who have you know, whose lives have given us that or given our culture that idea of drunkenness and writers. F. Scott Fitzgerald, when he was in his drunken years, he was not producing, you know,
Yeah.
and So yeah, absolutely. You have to stay fully alive in your senses. You have to stay sensitive to things and curious about things, and you have to let those things pull you forward. And that's a positive compulsion, not a negative need to create, I think. So
You just said something, and I'm gonna think out loud about it for a second, and I might edit this if it's not, if it doesn't, if it doesn't go anywhere helpful. But you said stay sensitive, and the image that popped in my head was back to the kids in
mm,
art schools, fully, they're for sometimes for the first time learning how to navigate being so sensitive and
mm,
having everything so alive and so raw and so new, and then
mm,
at the same time trying to make something with that and balance it, and maybe the labels that we put on it aren't accurate and they maybe do more harm, because maybe they're not, maybe they don't start out depressed, maybe they just start out really sensitive and unsure how to express that,
yeah. I think there's a lot to that. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. This is why I love discussions like this, because we're both thinking out loud,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that after this discussion is over, some of the things that we've been thinking about right now are going to keep on in my head now, and some more things will click. But I think you're absolutely right about that. I mean, um, how can you create? How can you make any kind of art without um, sensitivity? You have to be you have to have that, and yet that kind of sensitivity also can be easily um, marred.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
You know
think
what I
there's
found helpful? So we share a birthday, so we're both cancers.
yeah, yeah,
And
that's great.
I love the Cancer crab visual
Uh-huh.
because it allows me to have my tough exterior and my soft underbelly. And like that
Yeah,
I can live with because
yeah,
there's a
it's good.
balance there.
Yeah.
We've got our expressive, artistic cancerness, but we also
Mm,
have shells.
yeah,
Keep them
yeah.
out, bad guys.
Well, it's interesting, and I feel like I'm on the verge of going off on different tangents here if I haven't already. So,
Tangent
but
away, it's the
but
best.
it's just interesting because I sometimes forget that I am 6'4" and have a deep voice and facial hair,
Mhm.
and that can be I feel, I think, quite different than I look,
Mm.
so but I like that crab. I like the way you described that. Yeah, the cancer crab.
Well, I also have my like inner child in there because I'm like,
Sure.
so in my trauma therapy, I write a lot about religious trauma, and in trauma therapy, I did a lot of connection with my inner child, who turns out to be me at 9, is the most vivid, and
Mm,
6 to 9,
mm,
and that's who I think I am, and I
mm-hmm,
forget. No, we're 46. I've had lots of kids. They're grown-ups now. Um, I have jobs and responsibilities and and
yeah,
things, and but the more I get in touch with her, the more my perception of things um,
uh-huh, okay,
enlivens. I mean, I
uh-huh,
don't know. She had such a new. Everything was fascinating. Everything was worth exploring. If there's a
right,
hallway, she's going down it. If there's a corner, she's going to see what's around it.
mm-hmm,
I
yeah,
was am nosy. So
yeah, that's great, yeah.
yeah, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, they're always in there. My father, who passed away last year, was 95 years old, and he used to say that that it surprised him to look in the mirror, and see this old man there, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the inner child never grows up.
I want to live. I always say I'm on the 120-year plan. I really want to be here for the extent that a human form can sustain. I really want
Yeah,
every second of it.
yeah,
The laughter, the pain, the joy. I want all of it. And
yeah. We're not middle aged yet.
no, no, no. Middle age is 60.
Yeah.
And God, you've just hit on one of my rebellions, because
Uh-huh.
when we turn 40, people are like, "Oh, you're middle aged," and I'm like, "On what planet do I plan on dying at 80? That's
Yeah.
not happening." Yeah, but I don't like thinking about the mirror. you know, and the cognizance of the years that pass and the people that you lose along the way, um,
Right.
and children being adults, and I miss them. You know, I'm not doing the
Yeah.
empty nest thing very gracefully. It's,
Okay.
yeah, it's not. No one talks about it. Like, you know,
Yeah.
it's not like when we have little kids and we can share pictures and talk
Hmm.
about their accomplishments. We have to like respect their own privacy and stuff like that. But yeah,
Uh,
no,
yeah. No,
I'm
it's
kind
right.
of angry. It's like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, what do they call it when it's a racket? Parenting's a racket because you're gonna devote your life to them and then they leave.
They do, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm actually kind of glad to hear that in a sense, although that's not very nice. But
No, I get it though.
that means I've got some company because it's hard for me too, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still close to my girls, and they're my buddies, you know. But yeah, I sure do miss when they were little.
Like you could do something. Like now when they have problems,
Mm,
they have to figure them out, and they are. I mean, I raised really independent, strong thinkers. They're really great. They're doing fine. All the things, you know, all the things that a parent would be happy for.
right.
But I can't do anything. Like I need to go have my own life, which is appropriate. But I'm like, remember when you can like just spy them across the room, take an instant emotional temperature, and know, like you can scratch their back, or you can give them a hug, or you can make them a cookie, or you know, that's taken, it's
Yep.
gone,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
it's past, and the grieving that goes with that is rarely acknowledged.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how we got on that note.
Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this, and it's an honor to be on it. You know, but I'm thrilled that you're doing this. It's exciting.
It's been a good lesson for me. It really has, because I had the idea a couple years ago and chickened out and got busy and
Uh,
wasn't really sure of the shape I wanted it to take anyway.
mhm.
But I've always wanted something in my like writing catalog that was about writing
Uh,
itself. You might hear Georgia trying to scratch in, but and so this is going to be it. This is my thing that's about writing. I wanted it to support other writers. And I wanted to see, because I've done behind the scenes stuff with podcasting and video production before, but I hadn't been on this side of it, and just wanted to like overcome some of my own demons. Because like one of the reasons why I've never read a Jax by Jax is just because I'm shy and I like stutter and I have a lisp. So I'm like, okay, well, how can you work through that? You can do the thing,
yeah,
talk to people.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but even asking 20 of my friends to be on
yeah,
this was scary.
yeah,
And I got
yeah,
20 yeses, actually more
yeah.
than that, because two of them are teams of people. So
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
that's like, okay, the universe is saying you can do this. It's going to
But
be
that,
all
but
right.
that's, but that's it. That's you know, when you really want to do something, whether it's produce a podcast. I mean, I say that like I've done it, which I, you know, I have not. Or write. You know, when you really want to do something, you just make yourself do it. You know, and you have to be, I think, comfortable with the discomfort of not knowing how it's going to go. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
there's something about, something happens to us when we're, by the time we're adults, where we want to know what's at the end of our journey before we even start. And you know, I think we have to try to feel what we felt when we were younger, and not know where it's going to go, and be perfectly okay with that uncertainty. I mean, uncertainty scares us, you know.
It
But
does. I'm laughing because I read the last page of every book I read. Every time I pick it up, the first thing I do
uh,
is read the last page. I want to see who's still around on the last page before I start it.
really,
Yes.
oh, no kidding. Huh.
A
Wow,
horrible habit.
does that ever ruin anything?
No, because it doesn't tell me how they're still there.
Uh-huh.
But if they're
Huh.
mentioned on the last page, and I trust, like, all right, this is gonna be okay.
Interesting. Okay.
This is
Huh.
ridiculous. It is. Because I don't
That's
like spoilers in anything. Movies, I don't
uh-huh.
watch trailers. I don't want spoilers. And I don't
Right.
really consider that a spoiler, but that is how chicken I've gotten with uncertainty.
Interesting.
You
Yeah.
have to let things go. So the other thing I've learned, this is relevant. I'm
Uh-huh.
in a 12-step group for overeating and codependency and stuff. I'm a control freak. I had no idea that I was control freak. It happens with mothers, especially because we're
Sure.
loving, nurturing control freaks. We're
Right.
interested in reducing the amount of pain our children are going to go through. So
Right.
we manipulate circumstances to make sure they go the way we think they should.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the years that pass, we
Right.
become, controlling. It's been very enlightening.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, it makes
Yeah, I
perfect
need to know
sense.
it all. Like, and letting go in the creative process is essential.
So you train yourself as a parent. You train yourself for however many years to be a control freak, and then
Yep. You got to let go.
even after that, when you're trying to create, you have to somehow free yourself from all of that
Yeah,
training, which was based in surviving as a parent.
it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bitch. So let's spend we have a couple minutes. Like
Yep.
still I want to talk a little bit about Jacks by Jacks, why you started it, why it morphed away, what like all of it. Like
Okay. Yeah.
local promotion, what you've done, how important local promotion's been in your work, that kind of stuff.
Um, well, so to begin with, I mean, it started because I wanted something like that to exist here, you know, and so I knew a number of local writers and really enjoyed their work and liked speaking to them, um, and at the same time, we talked a little bit about Jacksonville earlier. I felt like Jacksonville did not have a place that brought all of that together. And so the idea of Jacks by Jacks was to, focus on writers who were based here. Also, writers who wrote about this place. They didn't have to be both, but and also to use the city itself as the setting. So when we first started it, we started it in at the intersection of Park and King Streets and Riverside, and we used uh, restaurants and bars and a comic book store and magazine offices and a tattoo gallery and all of these businesses, people who were gracious enough to let us use their place and to use the city as the setting. And so it was always where you wouldn't be more than a block away from a next venue, so you could walk. You could walk from one venue to the other, and you would hear maybe 25 writers who lived here, and for short periods of time. So you could walk and hear somebody for 20 minutes, and then go a couple of storefronts down and hear somebody else for 20 minutes. And kind of, I always said, that you could arrange it like those choose your own adventure children's books, which I loved when I was a kid. If you want
Mhm.
the next thing to happen, go to page 63, or if you want this to happen, go to page 120. That you could map it out any way that you wanted to. So that was the impetus, behind Jacks by Jacks. And I've also always really admired people like Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the beat poet, who is known as much for his own work as for how he backed other people's work. So he started City Lights bookstore in San Francisco, and he started City Lights publishing, and was the first person to publish a lot of people who are um, it's ironic that beat poets are now canonical, but canonical beat poets. Um, so I mean, you know, it felt good to try to do something like that. At the same time, I'm not a natural organizer, and so I did it for 4 years, and by the end of that period, I didn't really know what else I could do with it than what was happening, and it was it was very stressful by the end,
Mm.
and so I met a couple of writers who were who had recently moved to Jacksonville, Darlin and Brad Kuhn. And Brad is from, I believe he's from LA originally. I could be wrong about that. But Darlin grew up here, moved away, and they had both moved here recently from Orlando. And they both really wanted to know how, really wanted to be a part of the writing community in Jacksonville. And they're also, they are business people. So I talked to them about whether or not they would want to take it over. And they said yes, and have done really exciting things with it the last couple of years. And this last year, I would even say that they've saved Jacks by Jacks, because this was an event that was started by it was all about bringing people together, and we're in the midst of a pandemic and we're not supposed to be together. So
Right.
so
I held my breath for it this year. They seem to have pulled it off.
yeah, and so it was filmed, and there were watch parties online, and if you haven't seen it, you can still go watch it. It's there, and they did a really good. It looks professional in a way that I would never have known how to do. I always tell them I owe them a chunk of my heart, or a pinky finger or something, which they don't want for some reason. But I feel indebted to them for kind of saving Jacks by Jacks. So this last one was number 7. So looking at Jacks by Jacks 8 in 2021.
That's awesome. I hope it continues, and because we do need, there are a lot of writers in town, and
yeah.
We do have a literary footprint here.
Yeah. And, writers, I think you mentioned this earlier, writers, writing itself is a solitary thing. So, I do know a couple of extroverted writers, but not too many. And so it can be a lonely experience. It can be an experience where you don't really know that there are all of these other people in the same community who are, who are doing something similar to what you're doing. And when you find that out, and get to meet them and get to read them and share with them, it can be a really liberating thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. And I look forward to whenever the next episode's going to be. I actually have kind of a big announcement regarding my career coming. And maybe I'll sneak in a little non-interview episode to share it with you guys. Till then, write on.